He thought no one noticed him mopping the floors with his daughter by his side until the CEO's sister saw everything and changed their lives with one bold decision. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Daniel Reed pushed his mop bucket down the gleaming marble corridor. It was nearing 9 p.m., and the last of the corporate staff had filtered out, leaving only the soft echo of his footsteps and the quiet rhythm of cleaning in their wake. Daniel had done this for years: mop, scrub, sanitize, moving through each hallway like a ghost in the machine. He didn't mind the silence. Silence didn't judge. Silence didn't ask why a man in his 30s was still mopping floors to make ends meet. "Daddy, can I sit over there to draw?" He turned at the sound of his daughter's voice. 8-year-old Lily stood a few feet behind him, backpack slung over one shoulder and big brown eyes peeking out beneath a frayed pink beanie. She pointed to a bench near the tall lobby windows, where the city lights shimmered like stars against the dark glass. Daniel gave a small nod. "Yeah, kiddo, just stay where I can see you." She beamed and skipped over, pulling out her drawing pad and a scatter of crayons. Lily was good like that, quiet, patient, never complaining. She knew this routine. Ever since Daniel lost the last sitter he could afford, she'd been tagging along to night shifts at the office tower, doing her homework under break room lights and sketching dreams on copier paper. Daniel returned to his work, mop gliding over polished stone. He tried not to think about what tomorrow's bills would look like or how much longer the car would hold out. One step at a time, one floor at a time. He stole a glance at Lily. She was hunched over her paper, tongue between her teeth, drawing 2 stick figures, one big, one small, beneath a tall building. Both were smiling. He felt something twist in his chest. Then came the ding of the elevator, unexpected this late. Daniel's posture stiffened. The door slid open and out stepped a woman in a tailored coat, dark hair swept back neatly, heels tapping softly against the stone floor. She looked out of place here, this late, poised, deliberate. Her eyes landed on him, then moved to Lily. She didn't speak, just watched. Daniel gave a quick, polite nod and turned back to his mop. Another suit, he figured. Probably forgot a laptop or a charger. Nothing to do with him. But she didn't walk past. She stood there quietly, her expression unreadable. And though Daniel couldn't explain why, he felt the night shift just slightly, like something important had begun. The break room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and lemon disinfectant. Daniel Reed moved quietly between tables, clearing away crumpled napkins and half-empty takeout containers. The plastic gloves on his hands crinkled with each motion, but no one noticed. They never did. By day, the room buzzed with voices, laughter, and deals made over overpriced salads. By night, it emptied out, leaving behind crumbs, sticky soda rings, and the quiet shuffle of a janitor wiping away the evidence of someone else's busy day. In the far corner, Lily sat cross-legged at a small round table. A box of crayons fanned out like sun rays around her paper. Her pink jacket was draped over the back of the chair, and her backpack was half-zipped, a stuffed giraffe peeking out. She hummed to herself as she drew, lost in a world far more colorful than the one around her. Daniel glanced at her between trash bags and mop passes. She didn't seem to notice the late hour or the cold tile floor beneath her sneakers. She was drawing a park, complete with swings, a fountain, and a little girl flying a kite. A man stood beside her in the picture, holding the kite string with one hand and her hand with the other. It didn't take much guessing to know who it was. "Hungry?" he asked, pausing by the vending machine. Lily looked up and shook her head. "I had the crackers." "Okay," Daniel said, though he made a mental note to check if he had any change left. Sometimes crackers weren't enough, and she'd never say so. The microwave in the corner beeped. Someone must have left it set. He walked over, reset it to silence. On the fridge was a sign taped with blue painter's tape. "Please clean up after yourselves. Your mother doesn't work here." Daniel smirked at that. No, she didn't. But he did. The break room door opened briefly. A man in a pressed suit walked in, tapping on his phone. He didn't look up. He didn't say hello, just grabbed a soda and walked out, not even noticing the little girl sitting quietly in the corner or the man collecting someone else's mess behind him. Invisible, Daniel thought. That's what you become after a while. But when he looked back at Lily, who was now carefully coloring in the sun with a bright yellow crayon, her presence lit up the dull room in a way no executive ever had. Maybe being invisible wasn't so bad, so long as someone still saw you. The soft thud of a plastic bottle hitting the tile broke the quiet. Daniel turned just in time to see a small splash of orange juice spreading across the gleaming break room floor. Lily looked up, wide-eyed, her cheeks already flushing pink. "Sorry," she whispered. He gave her a small smile, already moving toward the mess with a roll of paper towels from the counter. "It's okay, sweetheart. No big deal." She scooted back as he knelt down, dabbing the sticky spill before it seeped too far. His hands moved with quiet care. Gentle, practiced. Not rushed, not angry. Behind them the elevator chimed. Daniel didn't look up. Most people passed through the building without sparing him more than a sidelong glance. He wasn't expecting anyone to stop, but this time the soft tap of heels didn't keep moving. They paused. Close. He finished blotting the last drop and stood slowly, smoothing his faded work shirt and tossing the soaked towels into the trash. Only then did he look toward the elevator. She was still there. A woman in her early 30s, maybe with dark shoulder-length hair swept neatly behind her ears. Her coat was a deep charcoal gray, tailored and crisp, and the leather folder she held at her side looked more expensive than Daniel's entire week of wages. But it wasn't her outfit that caught him. It was the way she looked at Lily. Not with irritation, not with pity, just interest, soft and quiet. Lily noticed too. She offered a small wave, the kind only kids can pull off without awkwardness. The woman's lips lifted into the faintest smile, and she returned the gesture with a subtle nod. "Evening," Daniel said, clearing his throat. She looked at him then, really looked. And it was different from the usual corporate gaze, the kind that slid over him like he was part of the wallpaper. There was something behind her eyes, curiosity maybe. "Good evening," she said simply. Her voice was low, smooth, professional, but not cold. She stepped out of the elevator and continued on her way, heels tapping lightly until they disappeared down the hall. Daniel stood still for a moment, staring after her. "Who was that?" Lily asked, tugging gently at his sleeve. "I don't know," Daniel murmured. "Someone important, probably." But something about the look in her eyes made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, he hadn't been invisible to her at all. Elena Sinclair wasn't used to being surprised. She had grown up in boardrooms and luxury hotel lobbies, her world carved from quiet power and sharper expectations. As the younger sister of Grant Sinclair, the CEO whose name was stamped on half the tower's real estate, Elena had long learned to navigate the high-gloss corridors of privilege with poise and purpose. Nothing rattled her, not deadlines, not deals, not even the men who underestimated her in meetings, only to find themselves outmaneuvered by a smile and a signature. But tonight, something unexpected had stopped her cold. She had stepped off the elevator after a late strategy session, planning to grab a water and maybe clear her head before heading home. Instead, she'd walked straight into a moment that didn't belong in this kind of building. A man in work boots kneeling quietly to clean a juice spill, and a little girl watching him with worried eyes. The girl couldn't have been older than 8. Brown hair tucked behind her ears, sleeves a little too long, a backpack sitting lopsided in the corner. She wasn't fussy or loud, just there, completely out of place among the sleek surfaces and muted tones of a billion-dollar business. And the man? He wasn't flustered. He didn't bark at the child or scramble to get out of her way. He wiped the mess gently, like it was routine, like caring for this girl and cleaning floors were both part of the same quiet devotion. Elena had paused without meaning to. She'd seen employees in passing, of course, janitors, guards, cafeteria staff. She always nodded, she always smiled. But this wasn't like that. This wasn't just a staff member cleaning up. This was something else. He'd looked up, startled to see her there maybe. And when she returned his greeting, she felt the faint flicker of something odd. Discomfort? Embarrassment? Or maybe just surprise that someone had truly looked back. She walked away before she stared too long, but the moment clung to her thoughts like static. A child. In the building. After hours. What kind of life made that necessary? Elena had always prided herself on seeing what others didn't, and now she couldn't unsee them. The janitor and his daughter, tucked into the quiet corners of a world that rarely noticed them. And for the first time in a long while, Elena Sinclair felt something stir that wasn't ambition. It was empathy. The bus ride home was slow, jerking through quiet city streets under flickering sodium lights. Daniel Reed sat near the back, his jacket zipped to his neck, one arm draped protectively around Lily, who leaned against him with sleepy eyes and the faint smell of crayon still clinging to her sleeves. Outside, storefronts dimmed one by one. Inside, the bus was mostly empty, just a man in paint-streaked coveralls near the front, a college kid with earbuds halfway down, and the hum of the engine filling the spaces where conversation didn't go. Lily looked up at him, her cheek resting against his arm. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" She hesitated, fingers fidgeting with the frayed cuff of her sweater. "Are we always going to sleep in the same bed?" Daniel's heart didn't break so much as it quietly folded inward. He turned to look at her, her eyes big and honest, full of the kind of questions kids ask without knowing how heavy they land. He smiled softly, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "No, sweetheart, just for now." "Like a little while?" "Yeah," he said, his voice warm but steady. "Just until we find a place with more room, maybe even bunk beds, remember?" Lily's eyes lit up. "With the ladder and the curtains?" He nodded. "Exactly. One with purple blankets on top and twinkle lights, just like you wanted." She sighed, satisfied for now, and curled up closer. He held her tighter, staring out the window at a city that never quite seemed to make space for people like them. He wasn't sure when or if that kind of place would come. Rent was high, his hours were short, and the apartment they lived in was little more than a single room with peeling paint and a hot plate. But Lily didn't need to know that. Not tonight. Not when her world still had room for bunk beds and dreams stitched in fairy lights. The bus rolled on. Daniel leaned his head back, the motion soothing in its repetition, and let himself believe the lie he'd told her. Just for now. The break room was louder than usual for a Tuesday night. Daniel noticed it the moment he walked in, conversations that paused just a little too quickly when he passed, sideways glances that didn't bother pretending to be subtle. The usual clatter of vending machines and microwaves was drowned out by something sharper, whispering. He kept his head down and went straight to the supply closet. Lily, as always, sat quietly at their usual table, crayons spread out, working on a drawing of a castle this time. He gave her a quick smile. She smiled back, and he closed the closet door behind him. Inside he exhaled. This wasn't new. People always talked. Sometimes it was about janitors, sometimes about layoffs, sometimes about someone who got too close to the wrong office and got reassigned to another building. But this time felt different. He heard it clearly when he came back out. "I swear, Elena Sinclair, the CEO's sister. Saw the kid in the lobby after hours." "No way." "Way, my cousin's on the facilities team. Said she stopped and talked to them, the janitor and his daughter." Daniel moved to the far side of the room, grabbing a rag from the cart and spraying down the coffee counter. He didn't interrupt, didn't correct. That would only make it worse. "Why's he bringing a kid here anyway? Isn't that, like, against policy?" "Dunno, but now people are saying upper management noticed. Could mean cuts or a shakeup." A shakeup, right. Like kindness from someone upstairs had to mean someone was in trouble. Daniel rinsed out the cloth and kept wiping. The smell of stale coffee and bleach filled the air. Lily didn't notice. She was humming to herself, sketching a window in her crayon castle. He glanced at her, then back at the reflection in the break room's glass wall. There they were, the quiet dad with the mop, the little girl with the crayons, and suddenly it felt like everyone was watching, not because they cared, because someone important did. Elena Sinclair sat in her corner office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows and soft gray light. The city stretched out beneath her like a printed map, all order and precision. On the surface, she was focused, skimming through reports, highlighting figures, checking off decisions. But her mind wasn't fully on the quarterly numbers. It was back in the lobby. She couldn't stop thinking about the little girl with the crayon drawings. And her father, the janitor who had knelt so gently beside her, not even noticing that anyone important had been watching. Elena closed her laptop softly and leaned back in her chair. Her instincts were rarely wrong. She hadn't just seen a man cleaning up after a spill. She'd seen something genuine, something grounding, something real. And that kind of authenticity didn't come around much in her world. She opened a private messaging tab and typed a note to HR. "Quick favor, can you pull the personnel file for a Daniel Reed on the janitorial team? Quiet request. Just need general info. Thanks." A minute later, the reply pinged back. "Of course, sending shortly." Elena didn't know what she was looking for exactly. Not scandal, not charity case material, just context. A man working late nights with his child in tow wasn't doing it by choice. That much was obvious. But what was the story? Where was the support? And how had no one noticed until now? She sipped her coffee as the file came through. Employee since 2017, no complaints, perfect attendance, often picked up extra shifts when available. Single parent, widowed, no disciplinary actions. Of course, she whispered to herself. The kind of man who did the hard thing quietly. The next step came naturally. A conversation with the facilities manager, just small talk, asking casually about the evening shifts. She didn't say Daniel's name, but the manager's eyes narrowed slightly. "You mean the guy with the little girl?" "I suppose," Elena said lightly. "She seems sweet." "She is. Keeps to themselves, mostly. He doesn't ask for anything." That, Elena thought, is exactly the problem. She didn't move yet. Not officially. She wasn't one to storm in and make a mess, but something had stirred, and she knew herself well enough to recognize it. A thread worth tugging. And Elena Sinclair always followed the threads that others ignored. The folder in Elena's hand slipped slightly as she reached for her coffee, the familiar buzz of the morning elevator barely registering in her ears. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead, an executive meeting at 10, a contract review by noon, and a conference call across 3 time zones before the day was done. But something bright on the edge of the break room table caught her eye as she passed. It wasn't office paperwork or a forgotten coffee cup. It was a piece of crumpled, slightly smudged printer paper. Elena paused. Drawn across the page in bold, uneven crayon strokes was a rainbow that arched above 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing beneath a crude rectangle that seemed to represent a building. The tall figure had a mop in one hand, and the small figure held a bright yellow sun. Below, in careful misspelled letters, were the words, "Me and Daddy at work." She stared at it for a long moment. It was simple, childlike. But something in the honesty of it hit her chest like a weight. The way the 2 figures held hands, the rainbow above them, as if this place, this quiet tiled lobby and echoing break room, was their shared little world of color. Elena picked up the drawing gently, smoothing out the creases. It had to be Lily's. She remembered the little girl's round face, her shy wave, her unmatched socks. And Daniel, wiping up the juice with quiet hands and tired eyes, never once acting like he was owed anything. He hadn't even noticed her watching, hadn't tried to impress, just kept caring for his daughter like the rest of the world didn't matter. Elena stood there a moment longer, drawing in a slow breath. She was used to analyzing pitch decks and spreadsheets, not crayon suns and crooked handwriting. But there it was, more truth in a child's drawing than in most of the boardroom conversations she'd had all week. Folding the paper carefully, she slipped it into her folder, not to throw away, not to forget. Some things were worth holding on to, and some things were worth fighting for. Elena waited until the hallway was quiet before stepping into her office and closing the door behind her. She moved with her usual composure, heels soft against the polished floor, but her mind was already ahead of her hands. The moment she sat at her desk, she opened her laptop, fingers gliding over the keyboard with practiced precision. The message she drafted was short, careful, and deliberately bland. Hi, Dana. When you have a moment, could you send over Daniel Reed's employment file? Just a general review. No action needed. She didn't explain why. She never did. That kind of thing would only raise eyebrows. And Elena Sinclair had learned early in life that curiosity was best worn in quiet, measured layers. The reply came 20 minutes later, fast, efficient. HR was always quick when the Sinclair name was attached to a request. The file was clean, surprisingly so. Elena scrolled through the pages, her brows knitting slightly as she read. Employed since 2017, hired originally through a third-party vendor, then brought in-house 2 years later due to consistently reliable performance. No complaints, no warnings, not a single late shift on record. In fact, more often than not, he had volunteered for additional hours. She paused on one note tucked into the manager's review. Quiet, doesn't ask for anything, dependable. It wasn't meant as praise, not exactly, but it struck her just the same. Then came the emergency contact section. One name, Lily Reed, age 8. No spouse, no parents listed, just Lily. Elena leaned back in her chair, the screen glowing softly in the dim light of her office. For a man who barely spoke, his file told a story loud enough to echo. No complaints, no help, no one looking out for him. She closed the laptop slowly, fingers lingering on the lid. She hadn't been sure what she'd find when she asked for the file. She only knew something about Daniel, about Lily, that drawing, had gotten under her skin in a way she couldn't quite explain. Now, she didn't need to explain. She knew, and now that she knew, she couldn't pretend not to. Daniel wiped his hands on a fresh towel, the scent of lemon cleaner still clinging to his sleeves. He'd just finished buffing the brass trim in the main lobby when the call came over the building's crackling PA system. Daniel Reed, please report to conference room B on the 12th floor. His brow furrowed. Conference rooms weren't his territory. He glanced at the maintenance log. No pending work orders up there. No spills. No broken lights. Lily looked up from where she was drawing near the supply closet. Did you do something wrong? He forced a smile. Not unless polishing too hard is a crime. She giggled. He tousled her hair, then told her to stay put, just for a few minutes. The elevator ride felt longer than it was. By the time he stepped out onto the 12th floor, his pulse had kicked up just enough to feel it in his chest. The air up here was different, cleaner, cooler, quieter. The carpet was thick, the kind that muffled footsteps and made conversations feel more expensive. He knocked lightly on the glass door of conference room B. "Come in," said a calm voice from inside. Elena Sinclair sat alone at the sleek table, a paper cup of coffee in front of her. Her coat was folded neatly over the back of her chair, her hair pinned in a loose, deliberate twist. She looked like she belonged here, in this room full of quiet power. "Mr. Reed," she said with a soft smile. "Thanks for coming. I know this is unusual." Daniel stepped inside slowly, his posture straight but cautious. "Everything all right?" "Yes, of course," she said. "I asked you here under the pretense of a quick safety check. Technically not untrue. I wanted to talk without the buzz of the break room." He nodded warily, staying near the door. "All right." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Would you join me for a few minutes? I'll make it worth your time." He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice, but finally sat. Elena slid a second cup of coffee toward him. "I wanted to ask a few questions, Daniel. Nothing formal, just curiosity." He met her gaze, quiet and steady. "Okay," he said. "Ask." The coffee was too fancy. Daniel could tell from the first sip. It tasted like roasted almonds and something floral, the kind of drink that belonged in a rooftop cafe, not in the calloused hands of a night shift janitor. Still, he drank it, slowly. Elena didn't rush him. She sat with her own cup, elbows resting lightly on the table, posture open. She didn't wear the usual stiffness of upper management, though the polish was still there. Too much polish for someone who called a janitor into a glass-walled conference room just to chat. He knew this wasn't normal, but there was no threat in her tone. Just something gentler, curious, intent. "You've been working here for a while," she said after a quiet moment. "Almost 8 years?" He nodded. "Since 2017. No complaints, no time-off requests, not even a sick day in the last 3 years." He gave a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hard to take time off when there's no one else to cover." She nodded, absorbing the answer without judgment. "I saw your daughter the other night." "I figured you had," Daniel said softly, eyes focused on the swirl of steam above his cup. "She seems bright? Sweet?" "She is," he said. And for the first time since he'd entered the room, something in his voice warmed. "She loves to draw, makes up stories all the time, says she's going to be a zookeeper artist-scientist someday." Elena smiled. "Ambitious. She doesn't know how hard things get yet. I'm trying to keep it that way." She let the quiet settle again before asking gently, "It's just the two of you?" Daniel's jaw flexed once before he answered, "Yeah." No details, no drama, just the truth, plain and unadorned. "My wife, Lily's mom, passed away 4 years ago. Car accident." His voice was steady, practiced, the way people talk when the story has been told too many times and still hurts every time. No family nearby, no one close, really. Elena's eyes softened, but she didn't offer the usual reflexive sympathy. She didn't tilt her head or whisper, "I'm so sorry," like it could fix anything. She just nodded. And Daniel, for reasons he didn't fully understand, felt the tension in his shoulders ease, just a little. "She's all I've got," he said quietly. "So I work, I take care of her, and I try not to fall behind." Elena folded her hands slowly. "You haven't, not once." And for the first time in a long while, Daniel wasn't sure what to say. Elena stared at the spreadsheet on her tablet, her eyes scanning columns of numbers she'd seen 100 times before. Only now they read differently. Hourly wages, no benefits for part-time employees, no childcare reimbursement, no overnight support. She sat alone in her office, well past dark, city lights flickering outside her window like static. The reports she'd requested from HR and facilities were laid out across her desk, and the deeper she dug, the tighter her jaw clenched. Daniel Reed made just over minimum wage after nearly a decade with the company. He wasn't even full-time on paper, though his hours came close. The technicality kept him off the benefits list, and he wasn't the only one. Janitorial staff, security, cafeteria workers, dozens of names, all with similar notes beside them. Reliable, low incident, quiet. All scraping by in the shadows of a gleaming corporate tower built on quarterly earnings and polished glass. She tapped her pen against the tablet, brows drawn tight. Elena had grown up in this world. She knew how companies operated, knew how the bottom line could justify 1,000 quiet injustices, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't looking at numbers. She was seeing faces. Lily's drawing was still tucked in her bag. 2 stick figures under a rainbow. A world where work meant being with the person you loved. Elena sat back and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her brother would call this sentimentality. He'd say she was too soft, too idealistic, that they had a responsibility to the board, to the investors, to scale efficiently. But she couldn't unsee it now. She couldn't ignore the man who showed up night after night, cleaning floors while raising a daughter alone in a city that didn't care if he disappeared, and she couldn't pretend that being a Sinclair meant she had no power. Frustration simmered beneath her skin, not just at the system, but at herself. She'd been here all along. She could have looked sooner. She could have done something. But now that she had looked, she knew one thing for certain. She was going to do something. The air was cool that evening, the kind of chill that settled into your sleeves and stayed there. Daniel sat on the stone steps outside the east entrance of the building, elbows on his knees, watching Lily swing her legs beside him. Her backpack sat open at her feet, crayons rolling gently with every bounce of her heels. It was their usual routine. Finish early if they could, catch the next bus home, maybe split a granola bar or whatever was left in the bottom of his lunch sack. Dinner came later, usually something cheap and easy, always something small. Tonight, he hadn't even brought the granola bar. Lily didn't complain. She never did. She was telling him a story about a flying elephant who worked at a library when the glass door behind them opened with a soft click. Footsteps approached, heels, confident but unhurried. "Daniel?" came a familiar voice. He turned, already standing, instinctively placing himself between Lily and whoever it was. But when he saw her, his tension softened. Elena Sinclair stood there in a long navy coat, holding a paper bag in one hand and a thermos in the other. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said gently. He glanced down at Lily, who had gone wide-eyed at the sight of her. "No," he said carefully. "We were just waiting for the bus." Elena nodded, stepping forward. "I brought something for Lily." She held out the bag and thermos without ceremony, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel hesitated. He knew this move, generosity wrapped in politeness, a gesture that said, "I see you and I know you need help." "I can't." But Lily had already leaned forward, her nose catching the scent of something warm and buttery. "Is that mac and cheese?" she asked, eyes hopeful. Elena smiled. "With extra cheese? And some apple slices on the side." Daniel looked down at his daughter, her cheeks pink from the cold, her fingers twitching toward the bag like she was trying not to grab it. He exhaled, slowly, then met Elena's gaze. "Thank you," he said, voice low. "Just, thank you." Elena nodded once. "You're welcome." And on those stone steps, under the buzz of a flickering street lamp, Daniel watched Lily take the first bite and smile so wide it made the world feel full for a moment. Even if it was just dinner on the steps. Grant Sinclair didn't look up from his screen as Elena stepped into his office. The space was all sharp lines and strategic silence. Glass walls, sleek leather chairs, a view that swallowed half the city. His desk, of course, was immaculate, just like him. Elena waited a beat, hands tucked into the pockets of her blazer. "Got a minute?" Grant tapped a key, still focused. "You've got 5. She stepped closer but didn't sit. "I wanted to talk about one of the janitors, Daniel Reed." Now he looked up, one brow arched. "Why?" "He brings his daughter with him to work some nights. She's 8. There's no support, no child care options. He's been with us for years, works more than most of the salaried staff, and still makes less than some interns. No benefits, no security, nothing." Grant leaned back in his chair, folding his arms like he'd just heard someone suggest planting a tree in the lobby. "And?" Elena blinked. "And maybe we should change that?" He gave a tight laugh, humorless. "Elena, you want to change the company policy because of one janitor?" "No," she said evenly. "I want to change it because it's broken. He's not the only one." "You think we're running a charity now?" he said, shaking his head. "This is a business. People work. People struggle. That's life. We can't save everyone." Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm not talking about saving people," she replied, her voice low but firm. "I'm talking about seeing them." Grant waved a hand like he was brushing lint off his jacket. "You always get like this. Emotional. You find one story, latch onto it like a lost puppy, and suddenly you're ready to flip the whole system upside down." She didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, the man she'd known all her life. The one who once climbed trees with her, now buried under layers of profit margins and quarterly forecasts. "I thought maybe you'd care," she said finally. "That's on me." She turned and left without waiting for a reply. Behind her, Grant went back to his screen. Just another name, just another file. It started with the shoes. Daniel noticed them one evening as he and Lily were getting ready to leave. She was tying her laces, neatly the way he'd shown her, when he realized they weren't the same ones she'd worn that morning. These were new, still scuffed a little at the toes from playground use, but unmistakably new. Bright purple with white stars on the sides, Lily's favorite colors. "Where'd you get those, he asked, crouching beside her. She looked up, blinking. "They were in my cubby, in a box with a note. It didn't have a name, just said, 'For Lily.'" He opened his mouth to protest, to ask more questions, to tell her they couldn't accept gifts, but she was already standing, bouncing on her heels, testing the way the soles gripped the floor. "They don't squeak," she said brightly. "And they don't hurt my toes." Daniel didn't say anything, not then. The next day there was a backpack, sitting neatly on the break room table where Lily usually colored, bright pink, covered in tiny cartoon foxes, the kind she watched in those old animated shows on his cracked tablet. Inside was a sketch pad, a fresh pack of colored pencils, and a zippered pencil case with little stars stitched into the seams. No note this time, just the silent, unmistakable stamp of someone who knew exactly what a child would love. Daniel found himself looking toward the elevators more than once that night, half expecting Elena to appear with that composed smile, half hoping she wouldn't. He didn't like the idea of handouts, never had. But these weren't flashy, they weren't public. They weren't about pity. They were thoughtful, quiet, personal. And Lily? Lily lit up every time something new appeared, not just because of the items themselves, but because someone out there, someone beyond their tiny world, had thought about her. That night on the bus ride home, she sat with the backpack in her lap, hugging it like it was made of gold. "Do you think it was the nice lady?" she asked. "The one with the coffee?" Daniel glanced out the window, jaw tight. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think it probably was." And for once he didn't argue with the help, because for the first time in a long time, help felt a little like hope. Daniel found her by the west stairwell, tucked between meetings, sipping coffee from a paper cup, like she had all the time in the world. He hadn't planned what he was going to say, just knew he had to say something. Elena looked up as he approached, sensing his presence before he spoke. Her expression softened, but she didn't smile. Not this time. She seemed to know this wasn't a casual visit. "You've been busy," Daniel said, voice quiet but steady. Elena took a slow sip before answering. "Have I?" He pulled something from his jacket, a folded piece of paper. A thank you note written in Lily's unmistakable handwriting, crayon hearts in the corners. "You left her another gift yesterday," Daniel said, holding the paper like it might burn. "New markers, that sketchbook, the backpack before that. The shoes?" She said nothing, but the look in her eyes was answer enough. "I appreciate what you've done," he continued. "But I need to be clear. I didn't ask for help. I'm not here looking for charity." There was no anger in his tone, only something deeper, something Elena had seen in boardroom mirrors and late-night calls, pride, scraped raw by circumstance. "I know you didn't ask," she said gently, "and I'm not offering charity." "Then what is it?" he asked, folding his arms. "Because it feels like pity dressed up in kindness, and I've worked too hard for too long to let my daughter think we need handouts to get by." Elena stepped forward, closing the space between them, her voice low but firm. "It's not pity," she said. "It's recognition." Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "I see how you show up, night after night," she continued. "I see how you take care of her, how you hold this place together in ways no one up here ever bothers to notice. You didn't ask for help, and that's exactly why I gave it." For a moment, the hallway was quiet but alive with unspoken things. Daniel looked away, jaw tightening. "I just don't want her growing up thinking someone else has to fix our life." "She won't," Elena said softly. Because she already sees someone doing it every day. He didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. It happened casually, almost by accident. Daniel was changing out the mop head in the back hallway near the loading dock when Elena passed by, arms full of reports and coffee in hand. She paused when she saw him, and he gave a short nod, not expecting her to stop. But she did. "Late night again?" she asked. He chuckled. "Aren't they all?" She leaned against the wall for a moment, taking a break from the press of fluorescent lighting and endless strategy decks. Daniel returned to rinsing the mop but glanced over his shoulder. "You know," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant, "this building goes through twice the amount of cleaning solution it needs." Elena raised an eyebrow. "How do you figure?" Daniel shrugged. "The auto dispensers are off. No one's calibrated them in years. They pour way more concentrate than we actually need. We dilute it by hand when we can, but most don't bother. Just let it run. If you adjusted the ratios, you'd cut the supply orders by at least a third." Elena straightened. "Why hasn't anyone said anything?" He smirked faintly. "Because nobody asks the guy with the mop." She didn't smile. Not exactly. But there was a flicker of something in her expression, curiosity sharpening into focus. "That's not nothing," she said. "I know," Daniel replied, matter of fact. "And it's not the only thing." He turned back to his mop bucket, as if the conversation were over, but Elena stayed a moment longer. She saw the way he worked, deliberate, efficient, the kind of attention to detail you didn't find on a resume, the kind no one in a glass office ever thought to value. "How many other ideas are you sitting on?" she asked. Daniel didn't look up. "A few?" She nodded slowly. "Next time you have one, tell me first." He glanced her way, surprised. "You sure?" "I'm sure." And with that, she walked off, her heels echoing down the hallway, not with authority but with intention. Daniel stood still for a moment, then returned to his work, a quiet thought forming at the edges of his mind. Maybe someone was finally listening. The day of the meeting, Daniel nearly backed out twice. He stood outside the elevator in his cleanest shirt, blue, a little snug around the shoulders, palms sweating, clipboard clutched tightly in one hand. This wasn't his world. The 12th floor with its glass doors, cold conference rooms, and people who spoke in terms like scalability and operational friction. He belonged to the floors below, where machines buzzed, shoes scuffed, and no one wore a tie. The elevator dinged. Lily tugged gently at his hand, her eyes shining. She wore her favorite yellow hoodie and had drawn him a tiny good luck card that now peeked from his pocket. "You got this, Daddy," she whispered. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped in. Elena met him outside the conference room, dressed in charcoal gray, her expression calm but firm. "They know you're coming. I told them you had an idea worth hearing. Just speak from what you know." Daniel gave a tight nod, not trusting his voice. Inside, a long table stretched across the room. A half-dozen mid-level execs sat with tablets open, lattes steaming beside them. None of them looked particularly impressed to see the janitor walk in. "This won't take long," Elena said as she introduced him. "Mr. Reed has a facilities-related idea that could affect supply costs. I thought it warranted 10 minutes of our time." Daniel cleared his throat, adjusting the clipboard in his hands. He spoke slowly at first, walking through the cleaning solution issue, explaining how recalibrating just 3 dispensers could save the company thousands per quarter in wasted product, and how those savings could be replicated across multiple locations. At first there were smirks, half-hidden glances, a few passive nods. But then someone pulled out a calculator. Another asked for specific ratios. A third opened a spreadsheet. And just like that, the temperature shifted. By the time Daniel finished, the room was quiet. No applause, no grand gestures, just silence, and something new in their eyes. Elena smiled. As they stepped out into the hallway, Daniel finally exhaled. Lily was waiting on a bench nearby, swinging her legs, When she saw him, she jumped up and threw her arms around his waist. "Did they like it?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer right away, but he smiled, really smiled for the first time in weeks. "I think maybe they did." The air in the boardroom was cool, filtered, and still. Daniel sat near the far end of the long glass table, his clipboard resting in front of him like a shield. His knuckles were white around a paper cup of water he hadn't touched. Across from him, 5 executives, regional operations, procurement, finance, and 2 from facilities, sat in chairs that probably cost more than his last month's rent. They looked polished, pressed, efficient, and skeptical. Elena stood at the front of the room, hands folded loosely in front of her. "I appreciate you making time," she began smoothly. "I asked Mr. Reed here today because he has an idea that, if implemented, could significantly reduce supply waste in our janitorial operations." One of the men, Wesley, head of procurement, leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "And Mr. Reed is—" "Facilities," Elena said, not missing a beat. 8 years. That earned Daniel a few polite, vague nods. Nothing warm. One of the women, Caitlin, from finance, gave him a smile that bordered on patronizing. "We're always open to creative thinking," she said in a tone that meant the opposite. Daniel swallowed and cleared his throat. "I've been tracking cleaning solution usage for a few months now," he began, voice steady despite the dryness in his throat. "The auto dispensers haven't been calibrated in years. We're using double what's needed. If we adjust the ratios across all 10 floors, we cut usage by 35%. That's thousands in savings every quarter, maybe more if implemented across other buildings." There was a pause. Then Wesley spoke, too casually. "And you came up with this in between mopping floors?" A few faint chuckles rippled around the table. Daniel's jaw tightened, but Elena spoke before he could. "He did the math, and I reviewed it myself. It's sound." Daniel tapped the folder in front of him. "I brought comparisons," he said. "Before and after ratios, monthly orders versus what's actually being used. It's all here." Caitlin reached for the papers, flipping through them, her brow furrowed. She turned to Wesley. "He's right." Silence. Then another exec leaned forward. "Can you replicate this across our regional sites?" Daniel blinked. Yeah, I think so." The energy shifted, smirks faded, tablets lit up, notes were taken, and Daniel sat just a little straighter, because suddenly the man with the mop had said something the suits couldn't ignore. Grant Sinclair didn't bother to look up when Elena walked into his office. His eyes were fixed on his tablet, fingers swiping through financials as if the numbers could rewrite themselves under enough pressure. "You pulled a janitor into a boardroom," he said flatly, before she even opened her mouth. Elena closed the door behind her, calm as ever. "His name is Daniel Reed, and his idea is saving your company money." Grant finally looked up, brow arched. "That's not the point." She crossed her arms, planting her heels. "Then what is?" He set the tablet down with a sharp tap. "You're blurring the lines, Elena, again. This isn't a non-profit. We can't open the floor to every night cleaner who has a bright idea and a sad backstory." Elena's jaw tightened. It wasn't a favor. It was a smart call. His data held up. Everyone in that room agreed. "Of course they did," Grant snapped, "because they know how to read the room. You walked him in there. You don't think they're going to nod and smile to keep you happy?" "He earned that nod," she said coolly. "You're just mad you weren't the one who saw him first." Grant stood slowly, walking around to lean against the edge of his desk. "We have structure for a reason, hierarchy, boundaries. Once you start treating hourly staff like stakeholders, it's a slippery slope." "To what?" Elena shot back. "Respect? Fair pay? Basic recognition?" "This isn't personal," he said, quieter now, more calculated. "Don't make it personal." Elena stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind her eyes. "It is personal, Grant. It always has been. You just forgot that people built this company. People like Daniel." He said nothing. "I'm not asking your permission," she added. Just telling you, I'm not done." And with that, she turned and left, leaving her brother in a room full of numbers, none of which could measure the kind of impact she had just set in motion. It started with small things, shared coffee breaks, quiet conversations in forgotten corners of the building, the occasional ride home when the buses ran late. No one said anything at first, just passing glances and curious tilts of the head. But in a place like Sinclair Tower, silence didn't last long. Daniel noticed it in the way people paused mid-sentence when he walked into a room, or how conversations hushed just a second too late. The custodial crew gave him sideways looks. The administrative staff smiled too tightly. He brushed it off at first, told himself he was imagining it, but then someone left a post-it on his locker. No words, just a crude sketch of a mop and a dollar sign. It wasn't subtle. He crumpled it without a word. Elena saw it too, in the way department heads started asking more questions, slipping her name into casual updates like they were checking her pulse. Grant hadn't said anything else directly, but the message was there. You're being watched. Still, she didn't pull away. They met sometimes after Lily had fallen asleep on the break room couch, just talking in the stairwell. Daniel told her about the jobs he'd worked before this one, the pizza place, the night warehouse, the months he spent living out of his car after his wife passed. Elena shared pieces of her own life too, growing up in Grant's shadow, expected to be poised but never loud, brilliant but not confrontational. With Daniel, she didn't have to perform. She could just be. And for Daniel, her presence was something like air, new, unfamiliar, but necessary. One evening, as they sat outside on the concrete steps, Elena handed him a container of warm food, and for a moment their fingers brushed. The moment stretched longer than it should have. But even before it ended, Daniel knew what people would say. Too close, too fast. What's a woman like her doing with a man like him? He wasn't sure how to answer. All he knew was that when she looked at him, she saw more than a job title or a pay grade. She saw him. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he had to apologize for being seen. Daniel sat across from the head of HR in a windowless office that smelled faintly of printer ink and stale air. The woman, Janice, neat blazer, polite smile, folded her hands neatly on the desk. A manila folder with his name on it lay between them, unopened. Daniel could barely look at it. "You've been recommended for a new role," Janice said, her tone light, rehearsed. "Facility supervisor, full-time, benefits, salary starting at 57. Daniel blinked. Once, twice. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "What?" She smiled like she got that reaction a lot. "Miss Sinclair brought it forward, said your recent efficiency proposal made a measurable impact, said you've earned the chance to lead." He shifted in his chair, heart hammering against his ribs. It felt like the floor had shifted beneath him, just enough to throw him off balance. "Why me?" he asked. Janice raised an eyebrow. "She said you've been doing the job unofficially for years. Not many people catch flaws in our inventory systems or train new hires without being asked." Daniel shook his head slowly, the weight of it settling in. He thought of his uniform, his mop, the back hallways he knew better than any office map. This wasn't a step up. It felt like a different world entirely. "And if I say no?" he asked. "You keep your current position," Janice said evenly. "No pressure, but the offer's real, and it's open." Later that night, Daniel sat on the edge of Lily's bed, the tiny good luck card still tucked in his pocket from the pitch meeting a few weeks back. She was asleep now, one hand clutching her stuffed giraffe, her drawing scattered on the floor beneath the bunk they shared. He looked down at her, the slow rise and fall of her breath. 57,000, health insurance, a future. Still, a voice in the back of his mind whispered doubt. Do you belong there? Do they want you? Or is this just her doing? And louder still, a deeper question. Can you say yes without losing the part of you that got this far? He didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time he had a choice. The office was unusually quiet that Saturday evening. The hum of fluorescent lights softened by the glow of string lights looped across the breakroom ceiling. Balloons, yellow, purple, and bright sky blue, floated gently above the table, which had been transformed with a colorful cloth, paper plates covered in cartoon foxes, and a cake shaped like a paint palette. Lily's favorite. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, holding his daughter's hand, completely speechless. Lily gasped the second she saw it. "Is that for me?" she whispered, eyes wide. Before Daniel could answer, Elena stepped out from around the corner, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. She was holding a small party horn, which she blew once with a gentle smile. "Happy birthday, Lily." Lily looked up at her dad for permission, just to be sure this wasn't a mistake, a dream, something meant for someone else. Daniel's throat was tight. He nodded. And then Lily ran into the room with a squeal, her sneakers squeaking on the tile. "This is the best ever," she cried, spinning in a circle under the streamers. There were cupcakes, coloring books stacked in the corner, a little art station sign on a folding table where Elena had arranged jars of crayons and watercolor paints. A few off-duty staff had stopped by to wave and offer hugs. People Daniel barely knew, but who smiled like they'd been waiting to meet Lily for weeks. He stood back for a long while, just watching. Lily painted a rainbow beside a sketch of a giraffe. She laughed as she wore the silly paper crown someone handed her. She blew out the candles after a loud off-key round of "Happy Birthday," and made a wish she didn't share. Elena drifted over to him quietly, offering a small cup of punch. "She told me she's never had a real party before," she said gently. Daniel looked at her, eyes glassy, his voice barely more than a whisper. "She hasn't." He didn't cry, but it was close. The kind of close that lodges in the throat, that you swallow down because you're afraid if you start, you won't stop. "She looks happy," he managed. "She is happy," Elena replied. And that night, as Lily danced between balloons and bright drawings, Daniel realized something strange and powerful was happening. For once, joy didn't feel borrowed. It felt like it might actually belong to them. The call came on a rainy Wednesday, just before Daniel was set to clock in. He had Lily's hand in his as they stood beneath the awning outside the building, waiting for the doors to unlock. The receptionist, eyes darting, stepped outside instead. "Daniel, I've been asked to tell you to report to HR first," she said, voice uneasy. "Something came up with your paperwork." His stomach dropped. What kind of something? She didn't answer, just gestured toward the elevators and gave Lily a tight, sympathetic smile. By the time Daniel reached the HR office, the unease had twisted into something colder. Janice, usually composed, looked frazzled. She didn't ask him to sit. "There's been an issue with your promotion file," she said, her tone clipped. "Missing documentation, inconsistencies with your certifications, some discrepancies in your employment history." Daniel frowned. "What discrepancies?" "It says here you were dismissed from a prior custodial job for insubordination that wasn't in your original file." Daniel blinked, stunned, because it didn't happen. Janice looked uncomfortable. "We're investigating, but until it's cleared up, your promotion is on hold. Effective immediately, you're suspended with pay." It hit like a punch. Not just the delay, but the word, suspended. He left the office in a daze, Lily trailing behind him, her tiny hand gripping his tightly. By noon, the news had begun to trickle through the building. By 2, it reached Elena. She stormed into HR with none of her usual restraint. Her voice was sharp, demanding, slicing through bureaucracy like a scalpel. Within minutes, she had Daniel's full employment file printed and spread out across a table, pointing out every timestamp, every signature, every detail that proved he'd earned everything he had. "This isn't just an error," she said coldly. "This was planted." Janice nodded reluctantly. "We're starting to think so, yes." "Find out who did it," Elena said, "and fix it." By evening, Daniel sat on the bus with Lily asleep on his shoulder, The suspension notice crumpled in his pocket. He didn't know who was behind it, but someone had tried to bury him, and for the first time in a long time, someone else was digging him back out. Daniel sat stiffly across from the assistant director of HR in a meeting room that felt colder than usual. No windows, no light, except for the humming fluorescence overhead. A stack of papers sat between them untouched. The air was thick with something that didn't quite smell like professionalism. The man across the table, Richardson, cleared his throat. He wasn't looking at Daniel, not directly. More like past him, like the outcome had already been decided. "We've reviewed the inconsistencies," Richardson said, steepling his fingers. "There's doubt, let's say, about certain details of your record. Things that don't align with internal documentation." Daniel kept his hands folded in his lap. "I didn't falsify anything. If something's in that file, someone put it there after the fact." Richardson offered a tight corporate smile, the kind meant to look polite, but said, "This is bigger than you. I understand that's your position. But the nature of the discrepancies has raised concerns, not just about the promotion process, but about your overall role within the company." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "So what are you saying?" The man sighed, like he was being generous just by continuing. "You have two options. One, accept a reassignment to your previous custodial post. No promotion, no record of this incident. Everything stays quiet. Two, contest the decision, formally. But if you pursue that path, there's a risk. You'll be seen as combative, a disruption." Daniel sat back, stunned. "You mean if I fight this, I'm the problem?" Richardson didn't answer directly. He didn't have to. It was a game. One Daniel hadn't signed up for, but one he was expected to play by rules written by people like Richardson. He thought of Lily, of her drawings, her smile at that birthday party, the new backpack she treasured. And he thought of Elena, how she'd believed in him, how she'd fought when no one else did. He stood slowly, hands steady despite the tremble in his chest. "I've mopped these floors for years. I've done every job no one wanted, worked nights no one remembers, and I didn't do it for handouts. I did it to survive. But if you think I'm going to let someone else's lie erase all of that," he leaned forward, "then you're not watching closely enough." He didn't wait for a response, because he already knew his choice. And this time, he wasn't stepping back. Grant Sinclair barely looked up from his phone when Elena walked into his office. He was mid-call, gesturing absently for her to wait, but Elena didn't sit. She didn't wait. She stood tall in the center of the room, jaw set, fury in her silence. When he finally ended the call and glanced up, his smile was automatic. "I saw the update. Unfortunate, but it'll sort itself out. HR's handling it." "No," Elena said flatly. "They're not. And I'm done waiting." Grant blinked, surprised by her tone. "Excuse me?" She stepped closer, voice steady but cold. "You let someone sabotage Daniel's file, and instead of investigating it seriously, you're pushing him to disappear. Reassign quietly or be labeled a problem. That's how you protect this company?" Grant's smile faded. "I told you from the start. Getting personally involved with low-level staff is a mistake." "No," she snapped. "The mistake was pretending the people who clean our floors matter less than the ones who walk over them." He scoffed, standing. "Come on, Elena. You're upset. But this isn't worth burning down your credibility. It's one janitor." Elena took a breath, then looked him straight in the eye. "If Daniel Reed isn't cleared by the end of this week, fully, publicly, I'm stepping down, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Grant stared at her, stunned. "You're bluffing." "I'm not." "Elena, your name's on the board. You've been groomed to take over." "Then find someone else," she said, "because I won't be part of a company that buries good people to keep things comfortable at the top." For the first time in years, Grant didn't know what to say. Elena turned to go, but paused at the door. "This isn't just about Daniel," she added. "It's about who we are, and I'm done pretending we're better than this when we're not." Then she walked out, leaving her brother alone with his silence and a truth he couldn't dodge. She had never stood up to him before, but now she had, and she wasn't backing down. The email came late, nearly midnight, buried beneath a dozen flagged memos and half-written responses. Elena saw the sender's name and paused. Trina Morris, Junior HR Associate. Not someone who usually emailed her directly. Subject line, "For your eyes only, Daniel Reed." Elena opened it. The message was short, but it hit like a lightning bolt. "Ms. Sinclair, I don't know if this will cost me my job, but I can't stay quiet. I ran the original file on Daniel Reed myself. It was clean. The disciplinary record was added manually by someone in Upper Facilities Management, Kenneth Doyle. Time-stamped. Unauthorized. I've attached proof." Attached was a PDF, a log of access records, change history, and a highlighted entry showing exactly when and how Daniel's file had been altered. Her hand curled into a fist as she scrolled through it. Doyle. Of course, Kenneth Doyle had been with the company for years, head of the facilities division, known for his territorial attitude and paper-thin ego. He'd opposed Daniel's promotion from the start, insisted it would set a precedent. Clearly, he'd taken things into his own hands, and now he was caught. The next morning, Elena didn't knock when she entered Grant's office. She dropped the printed file on his desk. "Your scapegoat just became your scandal," she said. "You can either fix it, or I can." Grant flipped through the pages, his face hardening as the truth settled in. "How bad will it look if we fire Doyle?" he asked quietly. Elena's voice didn't waver. "Better than it'll look if we let him stay." By noon, Doyle was gone. And by the end of the day, a company-wide notice was issued. An internal review had uncovered a malicious alteration to a promotion file. The affected employee, Daniel Reed, had been fully cleared and reinstated to his new position, effective immediately. The company regrets the error. Daniel read it twice, seated at the bus stop with Lily beside him. He didn't smile, at least not right away. But there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there in weeks. Vindication. It didn't erase what happened, but the truth had surfaced, and for once it stuck. Daniel stood in front of the elevator, a crisp ID badge clipped to the collar of his button-down shirt. The name printed beneath his photo looked surreal in bold black lettering. Daniel Reed, Director of Facilities. He adjusted his collar, heart thudding, beneath the unfamiliar weight of a dress shirt. Not a uniform, not coveralls. A shirt he'd picked out just for today, still stiff from the store, still foreign on his skin. The elevator doors slid open, and for the first time in his years at Sinclair Tower, he didn't ride to the basement. He hit 12. When the doors opened, the hallway was different, brighter. The air smelled like expensive floor polish and eucalyptus. He walked past people who used to not notice him. Only now they nodded. Some smiled. One even offered a quiet, "Congrats." He wasn't sure what was stranger, the way they looked at him now, or the fact that they looked at all. The office assigned to him was modest but real. Glass walls, a desk with drawers that actually locked, and a nameplate waiting for him at the door. The same people who used to send him requests through back channels now reported to him directly. Maintenance schedules, supply orders, facility audits, it was all his to manage. There were papers stacked neatly on the desk, a welcome email open on the monitor. He stared at it for a moment, letting it settle. Then came the knock. He turned. It was Elena. She stepped inside, offering a small smile. "How's it feel?" He took a breath. "Like I'm still waiting for someone to tell me it's a mistake." "It's not," she said. "You earned this." He looked around the office again. The polished floor, the window view, the hum of a place he used to only clean. And for the first time he nodded, not because he believed it yet, but because he wanted to. Later that afternoon, Daniel walked the floors, not as the man pushing the mop, but as the one holding the clipboard, giving direction. His old crew looked up, surprised, then proud. He didn't puff up, he didn't gloat, he just smiled, calm and steady. He hadn't changed, but the way they saw him finally had. The department store lights buzzed overhead, casting a warm yellow glow over rows of neatly pressed jackets and carefully lined slacks. Daniel stood stiffly in front of the mirror, arms held slightly out, like he wasn't sure what to do with them, while a tailor knelt beside him, pinning the hem of his new trousers. "I don't think this is me," he muttered, fidgeting with the collar. From behind a rack of ties, Lily's voice chimed in brightly. "It is you. You just don't see it yet." Daniel turned to see her striding toward him, dragging a navy blue tie with tiny foxes printed on it, her favorite animal, of course. She held it up like a prize. "This one." He raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She nodded fiercely. "You said I could pick, and it's fun but still serious, like you." Daniel chuckled, but there was a tightness behind the smile. He looked at himself in the mirror again, gray jacket, white shirt, polished shoes. The man staring back wasn't the one who swept breakroom floors and rode late buses in worn jeans. But he was the man who had shown up every day for years, for Lily, for everything. "I look like someone else," he said quietly. "No," Lily said, walking up beside him. She reached for his hand, squeezing it with her small fingers. "You look like a boss." He turned to her. She was grinning, eyes wide, proud. The kind of proud that made you want to believe it, even if you weren't sure. He looked back at the mirror, eyes meeting his own. Maybe this suit wasn't about pretending to be someone new. Maybe it was just about becoming the person he already was, but finally letting the world see it too. "All right," he said, adjusting the fox tie around his neck. "Let's do it." Lily beamed. "Can we get a picture? You look awesome." So they did. And as the shutter clicked and froze the moment in time, Daniel felt it settle. Not just the suit, not just the title, the truth. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was stepping into something bigger. Daniel stood just inside the office, his new badge clipped to the lapel of his blazer, the fox print tie Lily had insisted on knotted neatly at his collar. He didn't fidget, he didn't shift, he just waited. Grant Sinclair sat behind a desk that gleamed like it had never known dust. No papers out of place, no warmth in his expression, just precision and power, cloaked in quiet disapproval. "I've been meaning to speak with you," Grant said, folding his hands. Daniel nodded once. "So I heard." Grant gestured to the chair across from him. "Have a seat." Daniel didn't move. Grant leaned back, studying him like a problem he hadn't expected to still be on his desk. "You've made quite an impression, Mr. Reed. Not many people go from janitor to director of facilities in less than a month." "Wasn't the plan," Daniel said evenly. "No," Grant agreed, "but it's reality now, and reality carries weight, especially when my sister is involved." Daniel met his eyes. "Is that what this is about?" Grant's gaze sharpened. "I know Elena. She cares. She feels. It's a strength and a liability. You've become a symbol to her. I want to know if you understand what that means." Daniel took a slow breath, then stepped forward, refusing the chair, but also refusing to retreat. "I know exactly who she is," he said, "and what she's done for this company, and for people like me who never expected to be seen in a place like this." Grant's face remained unreadable. "And what about you? Why her?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Because she saw me," he said quietly. "Before the promotion, before the suit, before anyone else thought I was worth anything more than a mop and a punch clock. She looked at me like I mattered." He paused, the silence landing heavy between them. "And I saw her too, past the name, past the title, past you. I saw the part of her that's still fighting to believe this company can be better than it is, and I believe in that." Grant's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Daniel turned toward the door, then looked back one last time. "You don't have to like it," he said, "but you'll have to live with it." and with that he left. Not as a problem, not as a project, but as a man who no longer asked permission to take up space. The marble floors still gleamed like they always had, and the security guards still offered the same polite nods at the door, but everything felt different now. Lily walked beside her dad through the lobby, her little hand wrapped around 2 fingers of his. Her backpack bounced with every step, and her bright yellow sneakers squeaked softly on the polished floor. But no one looked away this time. No one pretended not to see them. The receptionists smiled genuinely. A few staff members waved. One even handed Lily a small bag of jelly beans from the desk, like they'd been waiting for her. It wasn't the building that had changed, it was what she meant inside of it. She wasn't just the janitor's daughter anymore. She was Lily, sharp, creative, full of light, the girl who drew rainbows in the break room and dreamed of bunk beds with purple blankets and glow-in-the-dark stars. And her dad? He wasn't pushing a mop or clocking in quietly through the back door. He walked tall now, wearing a neatly pressed shirt and a badge that meant people listened when he spoke. Elena waited by the elevator, dressed casually in slacks and a soft blouse, holding a to-go cup of cocoa just the way Lily liked it, extra marshmallows, no lid. "Hey, superstar," she greeted with a warm grin. Lily beamed and ran to her, hugging her around the waist like she'd done it 100 times. "I drew something for your office," she announced proudly. "It's got a giraffe in a hard hat." Elena laughed. "Perfect. I've been needing one of those." Daniel caught up, watching the exchange with quiet wonder. He still wasn't used to it, all this light, all this space. But seeing Lily skip ahead like she belonged here, like she didn't feel small anymore, it undid something in him. Not long ago she'd sat quietly in the corners, sketching her world in crayon while he scrubbed it clean. Now she walked through the front doors, waving to the people who once walked past her like she wasn't there. This was her world now, too, not just a visitor, part of the family that helped change it. The city was quiet in that slow, golden way it gets just after sunset, when the buildings glow with leftover sunlight and the traffic hums low like a lullaby. Outside Sinclair Tower, the sidewalk was still warm beneath Daniel's shoes. He sat on the edge of a planter, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, the weight of a long day softened by the cooling breeze. Elena joined him without a word, slipping down beside him in her flats, her blazer folded neatly in her lap. They sat side by side in silence for a while, watching the light fade from the glass above them. "I used to think this building would always look the same to me," she said quietly. "Shiny, sharp, untouchable. But now I can't walk down a hallway without seeing everything we didn't." Daniel chuckled low in his throat. Funny how life works. She turned to him, lips curved in a half-smile. "Yeah?" He looked straight ahead, thoughtful. "You spend years keeping your head down, thinking if you just work hard enough, stay quiet enough, maybe someone will notice. And when they don't, you tell yourself it's fine, that it's not your place to ask for more." Elena tilted her head, watching him. He glanced at her, smile worn, but real. Then someone sees you, and suddenly you start wondering why you ever accepted less in the first place. She didn't answer right away. The tower behind them shimmered in the dark, its lights flickering on one floor at a time. Then she said softly, "Sometimes the people shining the floors are the ones who should be standing on the stage." Daniel looked at her, really looked, and for a moment there was no company, no legacy, no suits or titles between them, just 2 people who'd found something they hadn't known they needed. He nodded once, slow and certain. "Guess I've still got a few stages left in me." Elena smiled. "I think you always did." And beneath the glow of the tower, they'd both changed in their own way. They sat in the quiet, no longer beneath anything. Not anymore.